Welcome to this Friday edition of the World Report with me, Arjun, Samar, Mahendran. Let's take a look at what's making headlines around the world. Army Chief General Upendra Dwivedi is in Srinagar to assess the ground situation after the deadly terror attack in Pahalgam that killed 26 innocent civilians. At the 15 Corps headquarters, he is being briefed as we speak right now, in fact, by top commanders on the ongoing counter-terror ops and Pakistan's repeated ceasefire violations. Now, the visit comes amid a high alert along the line of control and internal deployments across Jammu and Kashmir. Meanwhile, back in New Delhi, a key meeting on the Indus-Water Treaty is also slated to take place this very afternoon at Home Minister Amit Shah's residence. Union ministers including S. Jaishankar and C.R. Patil are expected to attend this meeting. Now, this follows India's decision to suspend the treaty, citing persistent terror. The move comes after Pakistan threatened to scrap all bilateral agreements, including the all-important Simla Pact. Now, here's a chat between my colleagues Shiv and Divya on the latest developing situation straight from Jammu and Kashmir. Listen into this.
The Army Chief has already visited Baisaran in Pahalgam. We can confirm that now to all of our viewers, that he first visited Baisaran. He's taken stock of the situation personally, firsthand, so we can break that on our screen right now. And he's now currently in Srinagar, where he's receiving that briefing. So the Army Chief, obviously his movements, are kept classified. But we've just spoken to our contacts in the army in Srinagar, and they confirm that the Army Chief did visit the site of the Pahalgam massacre in Baisaran, and he's back in Srinagar and will be returning to Delhi after he receives that full briefing. I am currently not in Srinagar. I am in Baramulla. I'm on the way to one of the forward areas near the line of control where, as we've been reporting since the morning, things are heating up. There have been some ceasefire violations. There have been an exchange of fire after a few provocations from Pakistani posts on the other side of the LOC. I'm not very far from the LOC right now, but I'll be up close in about 45 minutes from now. I can tell you that the Army Chief is going to be briefed on every aspect of what is going on. The information that's been coming out, especially since the all-party meeting yesterday, where the security agencies had not been informed once this particular location in Pahalgam had been open to tourists after a few days. All of that means that the entire security grid in those areas is being reviewed right now. Command structures, the deployments, etc. All of that is going to be under review right now. And remember, all of this taking place in the shadow, in the backdrop of increasing military tensions, or at least the atmosphere of tensions between India and Pakistan. And that's why we're headed to this forward area to get our viewers more.
Right, Shiv, this really comes about at a time when the United Nations has gone on to say, while they're condemning that terror attack that occurred in Pahalgam, which killed a large number of civilians, but they're also appealing to both the government of Pakistan and India to exercise maximum restraint and to ensure that the situation and the development that we have seen does not deteriorate, does not escalate any further. That is something that the United Nations is also putting out in a very loud and clear message. But of course, Pakistan there continuing, because we did see there was firing that took place late last night. So of course, security has been beefed up in the area, but a lot of concern regarding the safety and security of the area.
You're right. The United Nations will have to issue such standard statements about hoping that the two sides stand down, etc. But there are various hypocrisies that come into play when the United Nations begins talking about India and Pakistan. This is a bilateral issue. The United Nations has failed on many counts in terms of unequivocally calling out terror and identifying Pakistan as being the fountainhead of that terror. Even in this particular case, Divya, the statement, if you notice, talks about condemning the Pahalgam massacre, but doesn't talk about who was responsible for it. So there are complexities as far as the United Nations is concerned. When it comes to the United States, of course, things are much more complicated than that. But even there, the Trump administration has made its stand, I think, amply clear that it stands with India on this. The way things are going forward, all of that international support is going to be seen by the security agencies and the establishment here in India as a kind of validation and a window, perhaps, for whatever big decisive action is going to come next. And one of the reasons I'm in Baramulla right now and headed towards those forward areas is to get a ground sense of what the mood is. We're not going to obviously be talking about any specifics as far as military preparedness is concerned. It's a very, very sensitive topic. But the mood and the war clouds that are present and prevalent and escalating between the two countries is something that nobody can ignore.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people are gathering at the Vatican to pay their final respects to Pope Francis, who passed away at the age of 88. The Pope's body now lies in state at St. Peter's Basilica, drawing over 50,000 mourners in just 24 hours. The queues stretch far beyond St. Peter's Square, with many waiting for hours, in fact, through the dead of the night. The Pope's simple, humble legacy has touched millions, from cardinals to commoners, many of whom, in fact, see him as a beacon of hope and unity. His funeral, to be held Saturday, will be modest, in keeping with his wishes. Pope Francis, meanwhile, the first Latin American pontiff, will be laid to rest in a church in central Rome, far from the traditional papal tombs. Now, this just as he lived, with humanity, dignity, and grace. When the US President Donald Trump has expressed rare public frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying he is not happy with the deadly missile strikes on Kiev that killed at least 12 people overnight. In fact, in a post on Truth Social, Trump called the attack not necessary and also urged Putin to stop, but stopped short of announcing any further action. Now, the strikes mark the deadliest assault on Ukrainian capital in months and come amid growing pressure on Ukraine to accept land concessions in a potential peace deal. President Volodymyr Zelensky, on the other hand, speaking from South Africa before cutting his trip short, has said that Kiev is willing to negotiate, but only if Moscow halts its strikes. The UN administration, on the other hand, appears to be pushing a deal that could very well freeze territorial lines, including Russia's control over Crimea. Now, that's a move Kiev firmly rejects. Israeli military has admitted that its forces were in fact responsible for the death of a United Nations staff member in Gaza just last month, reversing its earlier denial. Do remember initially accusing UN of baseless slander. The incident occurred on the 19th of March when tank fire in fact struck a UN guest house in Deir al-Bala, killing Bulgarian national Marin Valev-Marinov and injuring 5 others. The IDF and the Israel Defense Forces say that the building was misidentified as hosting an enemy presence and not recognized as a UN facility. The IDF further has shared its prelim findings with the UN and has expressed deep sorrow over the incident, further promising to review procedures to prevent similar events from taking place in the future. The UN, on its part, has reiterated that the coordinates of all its facilities are shared and must be protected under international law and conventions. Now, this comes as Israel faces mounting scrutiny over civilian deaths amid the ongoing operations in Gaza. A teenage girl has died and 3 other students have been injured following a stabbing at a private school in western France. The attack happened Thursday afternoon at a school in Nantes. Authorities, meanwhile, have said that the suspect, reportedly another student, was restrained by a teacher and later arrested at the scene. The school was swiftly evacuated as armed police, emergency services, and even army officers responded to the incident. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has praised the teachers for their quick action, saying that they likely prevented further tragedy. Prime Minister François Bayrou has called for the stricter knife checks in schools, in fact, while officials are still working to understand the attackers' motives. Psychological support is being offered to students and staff members alike as the country grapples with the shock of yet another school attack. Over in Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney has confirmed that US President Donald Trump raised the idea of making Canada the 51st American state during a phone call in late March. Now, Carney said that Trump brings this up all the time, but made it clear it will never happen, or rather, he will not let it happen. The revelation comes just days ahead of Canada's all-important federal elections, where Trump's trade war and repeated annexation comments have become key issues. The US president has in fact imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian-made cars and has reintroduced duties on steel and aluminium. Now, this is fueling economic anxiety further in Canada. Despite claiming neutrality, Trump's influence looms large over the race. Both Carney and his opponent, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, have promised to stand firm against Washington's pressure. For perspective, viewers, more than 7 million Canadians have already voted early, with polls showing a tight race between the two leading parties. Listen in, my colleague Maha Siddiqui gets the latest.
This is a revelation that's come about. Mark Carney there, perhaps trying to win some brownie points before elections, but we do know that 7 million Canadians have already cast their vote.
Yes, absolutely, Divya. And much of the narrative around Mark Carney has been built around the fact that he is one person who can take on US President Donald Trump in a firm manner. And this revelation that Donald Trump did bring up the 51st state matter with Mark Carney can go either way for him, though his office was quick to clarify and reveal for the first time that issue was brought up, and that he did say that never has Canada thought of this, never will this ever be an issue on the table between US and Canada. So his office has clarified that he took a firm stand on the matter and only then continued his conversation with the US President Donald Trump. But this revelation was not made even by US President Donald Trump in his statement about the phone conversation on the 28th of March between Mark Carney and himself, in which he showed a respect for the office of the Prime Minister of Canada, because remember, before that he had been referring to the Canadian Prime Minister's position as the Governor of Canada, and there was no mention of the 51st state of as well. So this is one of the crucial aspects now that has come to the fore. However, Mark Carney's office has been clarifying that he took a firm stand on the matter, Divya.
US President Donald Trump is set to give an interview to the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, he's the same journalist who broke the Signalgate scandal or the Yemen war leak scandal last month. Trump confirmed the meeting on his Truth Social account, calling the interview a personal competition to see whether the Atlantic is capable of being, in his words, truthful. The interview follows a wave of tensions after Goldberg exposed leaked signal messages involving top White House officials discussing military strategies nonetheless. Despite previously calling Goldberg a sleazebag and the magazine failing, Trump now says the story will be titled "The Most Consequential President of This Century." Meanwhile, Goldberg will be joined by staff writers Michael Scherer and Ashley Parker, both of whom Trump has accused of also being biased reporters. Now, China is reportedly considering suspending its 125% tariff on some US imports. Authorities are considering removing the additional levies from medical equipment and some industrial chemicals like ethane, the report suggests. Officials, meanwhile, are also discussing waiving the tariff for plane leases. Like many other airlines, you see, Chinese carriers don't own all of their aircraft and pay leasing fees to third-party companies to use some jets, payments that would have become financially ruinous with the additional tariffs from Washington. It's time we step into a short break. I'll see you on the other side. In other news, Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai has hinted that Waymo's self-driving taxis could eventually be available for personal ownership. Now, this news comes as Tesla races to roll out its own robotaxi service across the US this year. Waymo, meanwhile, is currently the only US firm operating fully autonomous fare-collecting robotaxis with over 250,000 weekly rides clocked in now. Analysts, meanwhile, have said that personal ownership could happen through partnerships, as Alphabet is unlikely to manufacture vehicles itself. Apple reportedly plans to assemble all iPhones sold in the US in India starting next year. Now, this move comes amid ongoing US-China trade tensions under Donald Trump's administration. Now, by shifting production away from China, Apple essentially hopes to insulate its supply chain from tariffs and also geopolitical risks. The company is already ramping up its production capabilities in India with local manufacturing partners at the helm of it. After years of failed acquisitions, Intel is charting a new course to compete with AI chip leader NVIDIA. New CEO Lip Bhutan says that the company will in fact focus on in-house innovation, optimizing its existing products for AI workloads like robotics and virtual agents. Now, the move marks a shift from Intel's previous strategy of buying startups to break into artificial intelligence. CEO David Sinsner added that acquisitions are off the table for now as Intel prioritizes financial health over expansion dreams. Meanwhile, Samsung SDI has warned that US tariffs will raise the cost of producing electric vehicle batteries in America itself. While the batteries themselves are made domestically, many key components are still imported and now face added charges. The company, which supplies GM, Rivian and BMW cars, says it's unclear whether it will pass those costs on to the customers or not. It plans to, for now, monitor tariff developments closely and work with automakers around the world to reduce the financial impact. In the world of sports, Indian javelin thrower and Olympian Neeraj Chopra has replied to those who question his integrity after the Pahalgam terrorist attack. Chopra was criticized for inviting Pakistani javelin thrower and his contemporary Arshad Nadeem to the Neeraj Chopra Classic, a top-tier international athletic meet named after the Indian golden boy. Now, Chopra took to his Instagram to issue a statement this morning about getting hate after the Pahalgam attack. He clarified that the invite was sent 2 days before the attack, and the Pakistani athlete's presence at the meet was out of question after the developments. The Olympic gold medalist had to justify that national interests are his priority and nothing, in fact, comes above the country for him. He also took a jibe at the hypocrites who, in fact, sent him hate comments to his family, especially his mother, who was praised for her innocent comment towards Arshad Nadeem. On the tennis court, Novak Djokovic has acknowledged a generational shift in men's tennis with the rise of younger stars and the retirement of legends like Federer, Nadal and Murray. Speaking at the Madrid Open, Djokovic said that the dominance of the Big Four is giving way to a new era. And while fans are still adjusting to their absence, the hopes to keep the older generation's flag flying a little longer. The 24-time Grand Slam winner emphasized that no player is bigger than the sport and that tennis will always be bigger than any individual. Djokovic, meanwhile, now sets his sight on the French Open, which begins from the 25th of May. There were surprises and shocks on day one of the NFL draft. Cam Ward, once an unranked high school recruit, went number 1 overall to the Titans. The Jaguars, meanwhile, traded up to grab Travis Hunter at number 2. Paying a premium for the two-way star from Colorado. Penn State's Abdul Carter rounded up the top 3. But the biggest talking point, viewers, Shedeur Sanders wasn't selected in the first round at all. Despite high ratings from top analysts, the New York Giants had 2 chances, in fact, to take him but passed, instead picking Jackson Dart at number 25, hoping to recreate some Mississippi magic like they did with Eli Manning. Star Power lit up the red carpet at the Time 100 Gala in New York, where honorees and influential figures gathered to celebrate Time magazine's annual list. That's right, Demi Moore, Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Serena Williams and Hiroki Sanada were among the notable names attending the high-profile event. The 2025 Time 100 issue features 5 cover stars including Moore, Snoop Dogg, Ed Sheeran, Demi Haspis and Serena Williams. The gala will air as a primetime special on the 4th of May and follows the Time 100 Summit, which focuses on global solutions and driving impact. The third and final season of The Summer I Turned Pretty lands on July 16, and the emotional teaser is already out there. Set to Taylor Swift's Daylight and Red, the trailer picks up with Belly and Jeremiah's romance at college before the reappearance of Conrad brings back old flooding memories. That's all we have for you today. Take care and have a wonderful day.